We're so excited to have you here with us today at our Ask a Grad Student session. This is part of an entire series of events that's happening over the winter term. So many of you have probably seen and heard from us multiple times now, and we're sorry to be sending you so many emails, but I think this, we're bringing so many excellent special guest speakers and alum and grad students in, and really wanted to give our students an opportunity to learn about different career paths and connect with people who might help them make some decisions about their next steps. So Caitlin has just put the link to our website on the Dal Science Hub that has a little bit more information about the Pathway Exploration Weeks. And just so you know, these will be happening all throughout the winter term. So we started on January 25th with a week focused on science and society. The theme this week is research and discovery. We have a few other events this week, including a session tomorrow morning with Alex Chow, who completed some summer research last summer, which is going to be a great way to learn a little bit more about the summer research experience. On Thursday, we have an alumni session with Dr. Stephen Glazier, who is a PhD graduate from the Department of Physics, who now works at Novonix, which is truly on the cutting edge of battery tech and doing incredible work here in Nova Scotia. And then Friday, we have a session with Dr. Leslie Fillmore all about honors. So all of your questions about honors will be answered by Dr. Fillmore then, and that's Friday morning at 10 a.m. So yeah, so we have lots of sessions coming up through the rest of this week and in the weeks to come. So please keep your eyes on that website there and on your emails, because we'll be sending sort of a weekly overview of events at the top of every week. So you're definitely going to get sick of hearing from us by the end of this winter term, but we thank you for your eyes and your ears. So today's guest is Gracious Kasheke, who is a graduate of the BSc Neuroscience program just last year, just a few months ago, really, it seems like. And Gracious is now a MSc student in the Department of Pharmacology in the Faculty of Medicine. And Gracious is going to tell us a bit about his work today, about the research experience in grad school, how his research experience in his undergraduate has really, shaped his next steps into grad school, and what those further next steps might be after his MSc is complete next year, I think. And so fingers, don't be silly. So as Gracious said at the top here, please fire any questions our way. That keeps the dialogue and discussion really active and fun. So please ask your questions, turn on your mics, turn on your cameras. We love to see your faces. We miss you. Or put a question in the chat, and I'd be happy to relay it to Gracious. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Gracious just for a little welcome and hello from you, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds good. I'm really excited to chat with everybody today. And so, as Allison mentioned, I just started my master's in the Department of Pharmacology. And so right now I'm still doing some neuroscience related research, just sort of in a different field. So pharmacology is a bit more broad. But it does encompass a lot of neuroscientific research, especially here at Dal. And so, I started my master's looking at different drugs that might be able to help either stop the progression of or reverse the progression of multiple sclerosis. And so I think many of you might have heard of what multiple sclerosis is, but it's essentially a neurological disease that attacks the health of the nerves and the neurons in the body. It's autoimmune, so your immune system sort of starts to attack away at some of the neural tissue, which leads to, as you can imagine, a bunch of different symptoms. So essentially, the drugs that I'm working on are trying to stop that response and the outcomes of the disease. I can keep going if you would like. So that's one thing that I can do. I can also open up the floor just for questions, general questions. And these can be like general questions about grad school. They can be specific questions about why I'm doing the research that I'm doing or how I got into the research that I got into, or school and general life balance and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I can take a pause here or keep going.
Well, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. We'll give it that awkward 5 to 10 seconds to see if anyone asks a question. If not, oh, we've got one, Valeria. Yeah, would you like to turn your camera on?
No, sorry, my network is not allowing me to do that. My
No
Wi-Fi will
problem.
shut down.
But voice, no worries.
Yeah, I'm also in the neuroscience program, and I really want to go into master's in pharmacology. So this is a perfect session. Thank you so much for it. I was just curious, did you have any issues going from a neuroscience to a pharmacology degree? Because when I was looking for all the grad school requirements, and I was mostly looking like other universities, but it was requiring a lot of like biochemical classes and research. So did you have any experience with that?
So that's a great question, and you bring up a good point. So depending on your program of interest and at what universities you're interested in attending, it's good to take a look at their specific requirements. I had a pretty good sense, especially towards my third and fourth year, that I was going to be applying at DAL, because I developed good relationships with some of the profs here. And so in terms of the requirements, I was essentially just being sure that I hit the minimum requirements or the recommended requirements for the Dalhousie program in pharmacology. However, for pharmacology programs and a lot of medical neuroscience programs across Canada and the United States as well, they typically will require things like a biochemistry course and some other courses. Same thing with a lot of, let's say, like medical programs or other graduate programs that are related to neuroscience. They'll often require those additional courses. And so it's really worth looking into if you can. Now, in terms of whether or not I think it was a tough transition, I would say it's a relatively smooth transition, but it depends on what you're most interested in. So I was very interested in the mechanistic side of neuroscience, or the cellular side, if you will, understanding what's going on very, very specifically. And that sort of, that level of interest is very rewarded if you're in pharmacology. That's most of what pharmacology focuses on. And so that transition wasn't too difficult for me, considering that that's what I like to focus on regardless in my undergrad. But in terms of program, specifically applying to particular programs, it's always good to keep an eye out, just to make sure that you're hitting those requirements.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem. Thanks for a good question.
Awesome, yeah, that's a great question. So we have another hand up here from, let me just check my list here, from Sabah. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear my voice?
Yeah.
Hello. So I had a question regarding the international students who want to apply for the pharmacy program. I mean, I'm not sure if you know how it works for international students, but based on what I have read in websites and different schools, I've understood that international students, they have to be a permanent resident before they apply for the pharmacy school. Do you know whether that's true or not?
Me personally, I wouldn't know. So I'm in the pharmacology department, but pharmacy's a different school, in that pharmacy focuses on essentially training people to become pharmacists, whereas pharmacology is the pharmacological research side of things, in terms of postgraduate school. Yeah, so in terms of the requirements there, I'm not entirely sure. Did you just, if you looked on the Dalhousie website, typically what's listed there is the information to go by. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I think they sent a link there.
Yeah, I can jump in there. I'm not sure about the requirements for international students, but I just put a link to the admissions page in the College of Pharmacy. And apologies if you've already looked there, but it might be best to reach out initially to like an admissions officer in the College of Pharmacy at Dalhousie. I know often there are a number, like in the Faculty of Medicine with, the med school program, there's a number of seats for, I think, international students versus maritime students versus out of province students. So that might be the case as well, but I'm not 100% sure. So I would highly recommend reaching out to someone directly in the College of Pharmacy, who will absolutely be able to advise you on all things admissions. And I'm not sure what you're in, Saba, but even if you're first or second year, I would highly encourage, the sooner the better to reach out and start getting that information. So sorry we couldn't be a little more helpful with the specific information there, but I think reaching out directly to the College of Pharmacy would be your best bet.
Yeah, thank you. I had another question. May I ask? Yeah, so first of all, I'm a first year student, and I wanted to ask about the school actually. So I wanted to know whether there's an entrance exam to like get into the pharmacy or pharmacology school, or whether there's no exam and you get admission based on your grades.
So for pharmacology specifically, there is not a particular exam. There are minimum requirements in terms of a basic science degree. You do have to be admitted, and that is based on GPA as well as other factors that they look into. There isn't usually a specific test that you have to write. However, if you are an international student, you may or may not have to write, I think it's an English proficiency exam. So that's just something to keep in mind. And it's actually great, Saba, that you're asking these questions in first year, because knowing these things will make you super prepared in the coming years. But yeah, there might be just sort of a English proficiency exam that's usually quite general. That applies to, as far as I know, pretty much all programs. If you're coming from an international country. Yeah, but in terms of specifically for pharmacology, there is no entrance exam.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for the questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are great questions. And yeah, to Gracious's point, asking these questions early in your degree is a really great idea, and start taking those steps early on to set yourself up. So sorry if my sound is a bit weird. I'm hearing myself echo, which is never fun. But we have a question here from Ella. Ella, do you want to ask your question?
Hi. So I guess this is kind of a personal question, but what are your plans after graduation? Like, what are the job choices or options that come with this degree?
That's a great question. And for me, I'm not 100% certain. But what I'm trying to do, so I guess the philosophy that I've adopted has been something along the lines of following what I'm interested in. And so, for instance, the decision to go from neuroscience to a master's in pharmacology was based on my interest. Oh, sorry. But it was based on my interest in research specifically, and the fact that I liked the pharmacological side of neuroscience, meaning the very specific parts of neuroscience. And so that sort of guided me towards my next step, which was my master's. And in terms of what comes after this, it will again just depend on my interest. So far I've enjoyed research, which means that a PhD could be a good next step. Also working in research within industry is a good next step. So industry just means, if you could think of like any scientific company, that would be a place where you could potentially go and do research if they're looking for somebody who did research in neuropharmacology. I could also go into the pharmacy program. A lot of people go from pharmacology to pharmacy, teaching as well, and of course medicine. So far, based on my interest, research is pretty high up there. I've been enjoying doing research, so looking for jobs within industry or continuing on with a PhD would be potential options. And medicine as well, because I love people-to-people interactions. Like that's a huge part of what motivates me throughout my day. And so being able to do that day to day would be, I think, beneficial for me. Yeah, and so those are sort of the top options at the moment right now for me.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. That's a great question. Thanks, Ella.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ella. So we have another question, I think, from Valeria. Go ahead.
Could you talk more about your experience in finding a supervisor for your master's?
Yeah, that's another great question. You guys are hitting a lot of the points that I would have hopefully hoped to cover. So in finding a supervisor, I guess the long answer, which I think is more useful, is I was fortunate enough to talk to a academic advisor in my first year. And so each department has sort of a list of academic advisors. And in talking to an academic advisor, basically a professor who just talks with you about what you're interested in, what courses you might need to take, and what you are hoping to do in terms of like a career afterwards. I chatted with an advisor in my first year, and she suggested that I take part in undergraduate volunteer work, particularly in research. And so I started volunteering in Dr. Aaron Newman's lab, who you guys might know, and realized that I enjoyed that sort of environment. I like the environment of research. And that I like Dr. Newman particularly, that he was a good supervisor, but I didn't love the topic in my first year. And so I left that lab and then volunteered with a lab at the Mayo Clinic for a little while. That was sort of a perchance thing that occurred. But then again, got that sense that I do enjoy research. I like that environment. So in my third year, so for the Department of Neuroscience, one of the things that's nice is that we can do what's called an independent research project in our third year. And so this is a research project that you get to do for an entire year, and you get credit for it. And so I did that project under Dr. Ian Weaver, and I loved that. I really enjoyed the topic and the process of research. And so I continued on with research, and again, I was looking to get into neuroscientific research that was pretty cellular. And so that's when I started looking around and came across Dr. Robertson, my current supervisor's research, and I ended up doing my honors with him. So I reached out to him. I think it would have been about halfway through third year, so around January in my third year, and asked him if I could start volunteering, coming to lab meetings. Eventually, I was able to work with him over the summer, and then finally I did my honors with him the following year in my fourth year, which gave me a good sense of the expectations in terms of working in a lab, as well as understanding what it would be like to be supervised by him. And then, of course, things went fairly well over the course of my honors, and so I decided, and also he decided, that we'd be a good fit for a master's. And so that's sort of how I came to find a supervisor. And I would say it's helpful if you're interested in research to try it out. It's quite accessible here at DAL to get involved in undergraduate research. And so if you can get involved, to try to get involved. And that'll help you, one, to find out the type of research that you like, and of course, whether or not you enjoy research. But it'll also help you find supervisors earlier on, so there's less stress come fourth year and when you're graduating, going on to the next step. It could be very useful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'm currently actually doing a directed project and I'm applying for honors next year. So I was more so curious about, like, is there a difference in trying to find a supervisors for, say, an honors or a master's? Like, is it just the same process of emailing them and asking?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty similar process. So when I was looking for somebody for an honors, I just sort of emailed. I would look through, a bunch of professors' research, and whoever's research I found most interesting, I would reach out to them. And yeah, it's basically a similar process for a master's degree. If you're thinking of going outside of Dalhousie, the earlier you email, the better, because usually your correspondence will only really be over email.
Right.
But yeah, it's relatively straightforward in that sense. It's more or less just getting familiar with their research and then letting them know that you're interested in working with them.
Thanks so much.
No problem.
Awesome, thank you. What a great question. So we have a question from Nimi here in the chat. So I'll just read it out. Hi, hello. What are the general requirements for admission into a graduate pharmacology course? I'm in the BSc program majoring in chemistry and I'm interested in pursuing a pharmacology course. And no worries about your mic. Just happy to have your question. I'm going to ask sort of an expanded version of that. So requirements for admission into a graduate pharmacology course, but things that you think from your undergrad, and you've touched on it a little bit, that strengthened your application. So maybe things that you did outside of the classroom. You've touched on research and your experience in the Mayo Clinic in the States, but so academic admission requirements and the non-academic fun co-curricular pieces. So.
Yeah, and so Allison alluded to it well there. So there is what the requirements actually for entering a master's in pharmacology aren't specific, and I presume in your question that you're asking about the program, but there aren't specific requirements in that, like, you have to hit a certain GPA or that you have to have had certain grades in certain courses. But there are general requirements, if you will. So for instance, typically what's expected is around a 3.7 GPA. And so that's in your final 2 years of your undergrad. Finishing with the 3.7 is usually something that these programs will look for. That's usually fairly general as well, so not just specific to pharmacology. But if you are looking at other programs, it's worth looking into that. So that's one thing that they consider, and that's just your courses and your grades. But as I mentioned before, they do consider a lot of the extracurriculars. So for instance, one of the biggest things is getting undergraduate publications. So typically people will gain publications, again, by volunteering or doing summer research projects in labs. And so that's a great way of sort of boosting your resume when it comes to applying to graduate programs. Also, just generally volunteering. So as I mentioned before, I would recommend that anybody who's even slightly interested, thinks that they might be slightly interested in research, that they volunteer. And I mentioned again before, it was for good reasons, since you can get a good sense of whether or not research is for you. But also, when you apply to graduate schools, and and you show that you have that undergraduate research experience, it shows that one, you have the initiative to go in and take part in research, and also that you have research experience. And so usually it helps quite a bit with supervisors and with admission committees to see that you already have that experience. And so aside from those two, those I would say are probably the two bigger pieces, but they also will take into account the person as a whole. And so any sort of volunteering that you do as part of your undergrad would also be helpful for an admissions committee. And again, it just shows a person that has initiative, that likes to be involved. And so, for instance, I took part in the Undergraduate Neuroscience Society. I was also part of, or am a part of, the Dallas soccer team. And so those sorts of things can always help boost an application. And as you can probably tell, I didn't do these things specifically to enter the program. These just happen to be interests of mine. And so, if anything, if you're interested in something that's going on around campus, don't hesitate to just take part in it, because there's a lot of benefits to just, getting involved in almost any way you can. And so that's what I would say contributes to the selection process in terms of entering a graduate program.
Awesome, thank you. What a great question. And I think, and you provided some really great advice there. A few minutes ago, you talked about working or volunteering, I guess, but maybe at the Mayo Clinic. Mm-hmm. That's in the States. Yeah. I feel like, sort of international experience or experience at sort of high profile institutions like that are pretty sought after for undergrad students who are interested in research. And how did you go about securing that position?
So that was an interesting one. I was in the States in the summer after my first and second year to play soccer. So there was a team that basically invited me down to play soccer in Rochester, Minnesota. And so I decided to take the opportunity to go down and play. And while I was there, I just so happened to meet one of the people that was essentially the head of one of the heads of the Mayo Clinic. And so the way he explained it to me is that there are two heads. One is the head of sort of the administrative side or the business side. And then there's another that's the head of sort of the medical and research side. So he was the head of the administrative side, and just through it was essentially like a barbecue or something like that. We got to chatting, and he introduced me to a physician that works at the Mayo Clinic. So I talked to the physician a bit about what my interests were in terms of neuroscience and research in general, and then asked him if I could attend his. He also ran a lab, so I asked him if I could attend his lab meetings. He was okay with that, and so I started going to the lab meetings, and sure enough, as it always happens in research, somebody eventually needed help with something, and so I offered to help, and so we began one project where I helped. It was a systematic review, so essentially we're just looking through a bunch of papers to get a sort of a consensus about a particular topic. And so I worked on that systematic review for a while, and then that one didn't pan out, but they had another one going on that they needed some more hands for. And so I helped work on that systematic review for a while, and technically that one's still going on. So at different times they'll check in, and then I'll chip in some information. But yeah, it essentially just sort of occurred through chatting with people. Yeah, that's it was a fun experience though, for sure. I would say one of the things that I learned, one of the bigger things that I learned is that it's the research that they do there at such a high profile institution, that the quality of research is very similar here at Dow. So getting involved in research here is actually an extremely good learning experience, whether or not you're going into medicine or you're going into research or into another field completely. It's really it's high quality and it's a good learning experience. But yeah, that's overall what I got out of that and how I got there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's, you know, you never know where you're going to meet a connection like that, like at a barbecue or
Yeah.
so always be on the lookout. But that's great. So nice to hear your story of working at the Mayo Clinic. We have another hand up here. I think it's just loading. Oh, Saba, go ahead. Unless that's an old hand.
Yeah, so I forgot to ask another question, and it was regarding my major. So I'm an undeclared major right now, and you know, I'm just a little confused of like what major should I be going into. I know you said you're a neuroscience major, so I would like to know how you come up with choosing your major. Is there any specific reason that you went into neuroscience or anything?
Again, that's a really, really good question. So the best way I could answer it is by talking about how I chose to go into neuroscience. So initially, I had a good sense that I wanted to go into science, and this was just based on my personal interest. And what I mean when I say personal interest is in high school and a little bit in junior high, I would spend a lot of time just watching like YouTube videos and whatnot about cool and new scientific phenomena. So like I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the YouTube channel SciShow or Crash Course. They're pretty well known, or Vsauce. And so all of these are just basically they would just sort of, you know, create a bunch of content, a bunch of videos about new scientific phenomena for everything from uh, astronomy to, you know, cellular biology to genetics to, you know, philosophy of science. And I really, really enjoyed it. So it's been a bunch of time watching these videos. And so I had a good sense that I was interested in science. And then I started to realize that, especially towards the end of high school, most of the videos that I was watching were related to psychology and neuroscience. And the more I watched these psych and neuro videos, the more I realized that I really like the physiological side of things. So the cellular side and what's going on with the cells that is causing these behaviors that, you know, we see in psychology. And that's just sort of the way, I guess, I like to approach questions and answers. Psychology was really interesting to me, but then I started to continually ask, well, why? Why is that occurring? How does that system work? And most of those answers, to me, I found were in neuroscience, in a simplistic way, if you will. And so, yeah, towards the end of high school, most of what I would watch in terms of these interesting science videos were neuroscience videos. And I liked them so much that I would, you know, rewatch some of these because I just wanted to remember exactly how the neurons communicate with each other, exactly how they work. Then I think in university, I finally realized, and so in my first year, I finally realized that these videos that I was watching weren't necessarily supposed to just be cool and fun science videos. Especially towards the end of my degree, I was watching videos that were basically just educational course material, hence the channel name Crash Course. And so based on that, I got a good sense that, okay, I think I like the academic side of neuroscience, if you will, or studying neuroscience. That being said, going into first year, I still didn't want to go in closed-minded, like certain that I was going to go into neuroscience. And so I remember at the beginning of the year, in talking with an academic advisor, I said something along the lines of, I'm pretty sure I want to major in neuro, but I do want to, get a good sense based on these courses, all the courses that I'm taking, to see whether or not I want to pursue neuro, or whether or not I want to pursue, let's say I loved chemistry in first year way more than the neuroscience, then I would have pursued chemistry, because I find it's a little bit difficult to know based on your high school experience, but it's a bit easier to know based on sort of your first year experience when you can compare all these courses that you're taking. Yeah, and towards the end of my first year, I still wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to do neuro, just because I loved cell bio. So there's one specific module of biology in first year that is cell bio. And I remember absolutely loving that. So I was considering doing microbiology and immunology, but in the end decided that if I selected neuroscience, I could look at the microbiology of a neuron, or the microbiology and immune aspects of neurology, but that if I selected microbiome and immunology, I might miss out on some of the neuroscientific aspects of that field. So I essentially picked the one that would allow me to do both. And yeah, retrospectively, I guess it makes a lot of sense, considering that now I do basically microbiology and immunology in neurons for my master's. I'm only putting that together now, actually.
Hindsight's 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
Saba, does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask something else about the courses that you were taking. So were you taking your courses based on a specific plan that, like, you knew you would go to the pharmacology school, and then based on the requirements you were taking courses, or did you just randomly start taking courses? I'm just a little confused, and I'm worried that I might be actually taking the wrong courses. So I would like to know how you did that.
Before you jump in, I just want to add that in your first year, and sorry, Gracious, if this is where you're going, you don't have to declare your major until towards the end of your first year, and that we have advisors that can help you to select that, and that often there's a misconception that you need to be in a certain program to go to a certain graduate program. I think as long as you are keeping track of the requirements, the course requirements, there might be course requirements for, pharmacology, pharmacy, medicine, things like that. As long as you have those course requirements and all of the admissions requirements, it doesn't really matter what your undergraduate degree is in. You could have an English degree and go to med school or pharmacy. Sorry to cut you off, Gracious, but I just wanted to add that before going into the next part of your question there, and making sure you're taking the right courses. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, that was a great point to drop in there. And Saba, you said you're in first year. That's correct?
Yeah, I'm first year student, and I haven't declared my major.
Okay. So in terms of course selection, so yes, like Allison mentioned, course selection will depend on the undergraduate program that you're planning on going into or that you're in. So right now, I think you're probably taking a lot of the basic science courses. So that would be psych and neuro, chemistry, bio, math, English, or you would be taking writing and science communication, stats, and then basically the second course version of those courses. You might have physics and some other courses thrown in there as well. But in terms of course selection, I would say, so the primary thing that I base it on is the program of interest. And that will depend quite literally on what you're interested in doing. So if you think you're interested in neuroscience or microbiome or English or whatever it might be, then the base courses that you would take should basically just lead you to ensure that you have those requirements when you graduate. The secondary thing would be to select courses based on interest and pretty much purely on interest. And the reason I say that is because, so as Allison mentioned, a lot of times graduate programs won't require very specific undergraduate degrees, unless, and there will be some programs that you should look into all programs, not just AL. But most of the time they might only require 1 or 2 specific courses. But for the most part, things will stay general. And I recommend taking courses that you're interested in, basically so that you can get a good sense of what you like and what you don't like. And the other nice thing is that by taking courses that you're interested in, you'll come to find that the programs that you pursue afterwards will often become complementary to those courses that you take. So if you take, let's say, a lot of courses like I did that are related to cellular neuroscience, that eventually became useful for me as I got closer to the time where I had to select which program I was interested in taking. So selecting courses that interest you will give you a good sense of like, okay, this is what I like. I guess this is what I don't like. And now I can use this information to know which graduate program or what field of work I want to pursue once I'm done. And that piece of advice came to me from an academic advisor. So again, that's a plug to make sure that you're in frequent communication with academic advisors. But I would say is probably the most useful advice. Yeah, just taking courses, even if they're unrelated to your field. Like, I think one of my top 5 courses that I took was economics. I love the economics course that I took, and I still enjoy reading on economics quite a bit. And so that's just something totally unrelated to my degree that that I was interested in. So I made sure that I took that course at some point. And so yeah, that would be, I would say, the primary, apart from your, or I guess the secondary, apart from the specific requirements of your degree, taking courses that interest you, and that will give you a good sense of, where to direct yourself, if you will, in terms of what comes after.
Thank you. I just wanted to sort of echo Gracious's plug for advising, and we've put a link up in the chat from a few minutes ago that, and this goes for anyone if you're sort of undecided about a program, or if you're even later in your degree, go talk to multiple advisors. You don't just have to talk to advisors in the program or department that you're in, or maybe the one that you're thinking about. Like Saba, if you're undecided about a few different programs, then I would talk to multiple academic advisors, and get a sense of what it's like to be a major in that program. So they're always available. They're all doing online appointments and virtual advising, and they're always there to help students. So advising is my key takeaway, and just wanted to stress, and if there's any other first years in the group that are undecided, don't stress about not declaring a major right away. It's normal. You come into the Bachelor of Science undeclared for the most part, so don't stress about that, and it's totally normal. But there's many hundreds of other first year students who are exactly in your shoes, and you're not doing anything wrong or anything like that. So I would talk to advisors. There will be course selection and program registration later on in the spring this year. The Faculty of Science, alongside The Bissett Student Success Center will be doing a number of advising sessions and fairs to help you make those decisions. So keep your eyes open, sort of March, April time, and we'll be doing lots of information sessions on advising to, help you answer those questions that you have. So I hope that helped. We do just have a question from Samantha in the chat here, and it's unfortunately not one I can address right now, but Samantha's question is curious about the mark of pass during the 2020-21 academic year and if it will affect your applications to medical schools. I can get you an answer to that and email it to you if that's okay. I just don't know it off the top of my head, and I just don't want to provide you with the incorrect advice there. So I'm gonna loop back with our Assistant Dean Student Affairs, who will be able to provide that advice, and I'll send you an email following up. But I think the pass-ill information will actually be addressed on Friday's session with Dr. Leslie Fillmore about honors. So if that's something that you're interested in as well, she might be able to help you out there. But in the meantime, I will reach out to a colleague and get an answer for you and send you an email if that's okay. Just want to provide you with the absolute right information, and some of the information might actually come from the medical school, which the Faculty of Science can't totally address, but I can absolutely hunt down the information for you if that's okay. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Sorry, I can't answer it right now. I just didn't want to say something wrong. Saba, is your hand still up from another question, or?
Yeah,
I just want to make sure
I just wanted to thank you for providing me with the useful advices. And I asked the question because I spoke with an advisor a while ago, and she told me, like, if you want to go to the pharmacy program, then you have to select the microbiology and immunology as your major. So I was kind of wondering if I have to take that as my major, or do I have other options to choose and I would still be able to go into pharmacy? And now I realized I can choose another, different majors and still be eligible to apply for pharmacy. That's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And just in terms of the undergraduate degree, I'm fairly sure that you can take whatever. But just double check to make sure that there aren't specific course requirements, because I know that certain programs will have specific course requirements in that they'll ask you to take one specific course or two specific courses. But apart from that, you don't have to take microbiome and immunology as a degree to apply to pharmacy.
And an advisor might tell you that sometimes, because that type of program covers a lot of the required courses, or covers a lot of the content that would already be covered in the program, and that it would be a good link. But it doesn't have to limit you if you are studying or not studying that program. So yeah, are there any other questions from the group about Gracious's life as a grad student, and about what it took to get there? I have a question, if no one in the group does right now, and was wondering if you could tell us a bit about a day in your life, the sort of real day in the life of a pharmacology grad student, and what that looks like.
Yeah. So essentially what a day looks like for me is when I first come into the lab, I usually have basically a mental note of the tasks that need to be done for that particular week, let's say. And so what I'll do is usually I'll rank them in terms of priority, and usually they're all related to one ongoing or a couple of ongoing projects. And so, usually these projects have several different tasks that can be done. And so I'll rank them in terms of priority, and then I'll start working on them. One of the nice things about being in a lab is that you usually have quite a few people, a good amount of people around to help. And so if I need to take care of 2 or 3 tasks, then I can, let's say there's an undergraduate volunteer, I can teach them a particular task and have them perform that task. So for instance, right now, one of the things we're doing is we're cutting slides to get imaging of a spinal cord. And so I trained one of our undergraduate volunteers to do that. And so, I'll supervise that for a little bit. If that's going well, then I can go back and work on the next thing. A lot of it is problem solving. So whatever conclusion we're trying to draw, let's say testing out whether or not a particular drug works, I have to problem solve in terms of like all of the ways in which we can, all of the methods that we use to properly explain whether or not a drug is working. I need to make sure that the methods that we are using are valid, that they make sense, that they're well executed. And so a lot of my day will be, okay, how can I best display this data? Or if I'm using a new software, it's, how can I get this software to be compatible with the old software? Or should I do a comparison study here so that people can see what the old looks like versus the new, and whether or not the old software is a better method than the new software, kind of thing. So it's all sort of problem solving in relation to the outcome of your research, what you're trying to show to the world. And a lot of that involves like specific tasks, like making slides of spinal cord, or images of, so I work with mice, images of mice running. When when an experiment is going on, when I have a mouse experiment that's in progress, most of my days will be showing up to the lab and taking care of the mice. And so, yeah, it does vary quite a bit, but most of it is like specific parts of experiments that you're doing at different times of day. So you sort of have to block your hours as you're in the lab based on what needs to be solved and based on what needs to just be done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds very busy and detail oriented.
Yeah, I would say it is. I love the problem solving aspect. I really enjoy that. Yeah, I don't mind sitting, at my desk and thinking about something. So I find it very rewarding when you find the most apt solution to the problem. Like, okay, this is the best way we can show this data, or this is the best method. Yeah, or even when you find a new drug that would be worth pursuing. I enjoy that quite a bit.
And it seems like graduate school and your program in particular gives you a bit of flexibility and freedom to do that and to problem solve. It gives you that bit of, flexibility to find solutions to really, really, really complex problems. So kind of neat to have that that opportunity to try things and problem solve. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's that's what I gain the most personally from doing research, and that's again why I say like pursuing your interests or just sort of following your interests is sort of the best piece of advice that I could give, because that's the best way to get to know what sort of a job you want to go to every day, or what sort of an environment you want to go into every day. I really enjoy working with people primarily, and I really enjoy problem solving. Those are like my 2 favorite things to do. And so knowing that, the paths that come next, or the place that I'm currently, operating, it makes it easier to know those things and to continue to try to do those things as much as possible. and yeah, so I would suggest that for anybody, just sort of try to without rushing it, because it's not as time pressed as it can often feel. Just try to get a sense of what you enjoy, and try to do more of that, and try to do less of the things that you don't enjoy. um, and usually I think that ends up working, I think, for the better for everybody. So yeah, I'll leave that piece of advice with you, and also talk to academic advisors. It's a good thing.
Yeah, that's the takeaway here. Follow your interest and your passion and talk to advisors.
Yeah.
And we just have 3 minutes left here, but I have seen Samantha typing away there, and I don't want to leave your question unanswered, if it's something for Gracious here, or for anyone else on the call for that matter. Samantha, did you want to turn your mic on and ask your question quickly? Oh, something from Jocelyn.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to ask, like, are there any opportunities for a first-year student to participate in scientific research? Because I know that we have summer research for third-year and above students, but like, and do you know, like, what's the application procedures for like first-year students to join any research programs? No, research. Yeah.
It's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, Samantha, that is a great question. Again, very glad you asked. You guys covered a lot of good information with the questions here. But in terms of getting involved from your first year, I think Dal is just, I think we're really lucky as undergrads, especially at Dal, because Dal seems incredibly accessible when it comes to undergraduate research. And like I said, the quality of research is on par with the best in the world. So all it really takes is looking around. So one of the things that I would do is I would look at departmental websites. I would go to their Our People page, and so that's just a page that lists faculty. And I would just read descriptions of the research that these professors were doing. And I would try to, and I know it's tough in first year, and it was tough for me in first year, but I'd try to find one or two of their publications that I found interesting, and read through them, get a good sense of what it is that they researched. And if it was interesting to me, then I would just send them an email and say, hey, I would love to be involved in your lab. And even if it's just showing up for lab meetings and getting a sense of what it is that you do, I think that would be, a great thing to do. So that was essentially what I did, and it worked in first year. I got to volunteer with Dr. Newman. But yeah, there's not, in terms of the application process, typically it's just finding the professor. If they have requirements, usually they're listed on, let's say, their website. A lot of profs have a lab website. But if not, then I would just send them an email. And some of them do have requirements, but if you're really interested, even if you don't meet the requirements, if you're really interested, I would just, give it a shot. There's no problem with that at all. But yeah, just send an email to the people that you're interested in working with.
Okay, thank you.
Samantha, I just put a document here in the chat that covers a lot of what Gracious just said, but it's tips for volunteering in labs, and everyone's welcome to hang on to that and use that, put that in your virtual back pocket, I guess. So, but yeah, we are at time. We are at 4 o'clock. But I just wanted to thank everyone for such a fantastic discussion today, for all of your wonderful questions. As Gracious said, you guys kind of you covered all of the topics that I was hoping we would chat about. So I just wanted to thank you all for joining. Gracious, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and for emerging from your lab for an hour to to chat with us.
No, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I definitely learned a lot, and I hope everyone did too. as sort of a follow-up discussion, tomorrow we're talking just about summer research with Alex Chow, who's a third-year microbiology and immunology student. So this might be a nice thing to complement with Gracious's talk about his grad work in pharmacology. So thank you all so much. This has been recorded, and we will make that available on the Pathway Exploration Week page. So thank you so much, everyone. Good luck. Bye. Have a good day. See ya.
See ya.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.